Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jung O. Let me deliver my presentation on the theme of the development of Gwan-beop practice guidelines based on Seon Master Daehaeng's Dharma talks. Jung, who gave the problem of every moment of our life, also gives the answer and wisdom. That is what Seon Master Daehaeng told us. And also that is the opening of my presentation. When Seon Master Daehaeng was still with us, she asked us if she dies, will the practitioners come to her grave and ask her to save them? She told us that we all need to know that no matter what troubles come later, we are not going to avoid it. I started my research inspired by the teaching of Seon Master Daehaeng and her Gwan-beop practice, which guides us through difficult Buddhist scriptures so that we all can use our life experiences as a basis for a material to walk the path of spiritual development. Seon Master Daehaeng told us that we need to practice Gwan. That is the most urgent thing, and also asked us to believe in the deep root of our soul and go straight. The purpose of this study, inspired by the fervent aspirations of Seon Master Daehaeng, is to develop guidelines for the practice of Gwan-beop that she taught, so the general public can practice it and to build foundation for the globalization of Gwan-beop. Now let me brief you on the overview of my study. Since Seon Master Daehaeng is not with us anymore, so we cannot have the blessing of asking questions to her and having her guidance in person. This is time for us to continue our practice based on her past teachings. So the preliminary guidelines for the practice of Gwan-beop are identified based on Seon Master Daehaeng's Dharma talk titled The Ever-Flowing Path, which contains her teachings exactly as she presented them. A panel of experts to verify the validity of these guidelines consisted of the monks from Hammam Seon Center. I believe that the best experts in practicing Gwan-beop would be her own disciples, who now carry on her Dharma lineage. And thankfully, 102 disciples of Seon Master Daehaeng participated in my research for 3 times. As a result, a total of 17 validated Gwan-beop practice guidelines were developed based on social science research methodology. The expert panel of the ordained monks who participated in my research identified 4 common errors that the practitioners easily encounter in the beginning of their practice. The first error is the lack of understanding in the concept of Jung. And the second error is not believing in the innate ability in one's own mind. And the third error is that practitioners start observing or practicing Gwan-beop only when they are faced with difficulties. And the fourth one is that they actually cannot concentrate and entrusting everything to Jung incessantly. If I have a discussion with my fellow practitioners, I would say that Jung is what makes me saying all these things. However, I cannot write that in my written thesis, so I defined Jung as my origin and the basis of everything directly connected to my mind. Now let me talk about the 5 characteristics of Jung based on the Dharmic talks of Seon Master Daehaeng. So the first, the quality or the characteristic of Jung is wholeness. Jung consists of every single thing in the universe as a whole, and universality is the next characteristic. Anyone is endowed with Jung, and equality. Jung does not discriminate based on wealth, status, gender, and so on. And then immobility. Jung doesn't move, and instead it sends out energy like the axle that lets wheels move. And the next, the quality or the character is the dynamics of Jung. Jung is freely accessible by the intention and the use of the practitioner. So Jung is freely used based on the intention. When I first met Seon Master Daehaeng in person, I asked her to let me get hold of Jung. And I was very embarrassed because Master didn't say anything with a cold face. And after looking back on that incident, I just realized that I actually tried to get hold of Jung without trying myself. And Seon Master Daehaeng taught me that I shouldn't do that. So I believe that among the 5 characteristics or the qualities of Jung, dynamic and immobility of Jung should the 2 qualities that we should keep our mind, keep in our mind, and try harder. And this picture was taken one of those happy days that Seon Master Daehaeng was still with us and guided us in person. I started practicing at Hammam Sun Center when I was a kid, and what I heard a lot back then was that I should put everything into the so-called furnace of Jung, and I thought I knew how to practice Gwan-beop, but then I realized that I didn't know anything about Gwan-beop after 15 years. So I started working on this study after I realized how ignorant I was 20 years ago. Back then, I thought that Gwan-beop or observing is to take my agony away and put it into the furnace called the Jung. I thought the Jung is an imaginary figure, and the Jung is totally different from me. So I just thought about there are 2 wholes. One is myself, and the other one is Jung. It was such a big error in my understanding. One day, one of Hammam Sun Center practitioner came to Seon Master Daehaeng and asked how she can convey the master's teaching to others. And the master answered, "Tell them there is only one whole." And there are too many people who do not know the way, even if they have studied for 20 or 30 years. But it's very easy once you know that putting it into one hole and putting it out of that same hole is what one's own Jung is doing. These days, there is a growing number of practitioners who haven't seen Seon Master Daehaeng or talked to her at all. So I believe that is our responsibility to write down what Seon Master Daehaeng taught us in writing and in paper and pass it down to our future generations. I believe that one whole is a big theme for Jung, and this is the principle of Jung practice. Since we should entrust everything to Jung, whether it works or not, and I believe that it can be represented in this gray line, which she is circling incessantly. So we have a big round cycle here to depict the incessant cycle, and everything comes out of Jung should be put into Jung back again. So whether you like the output or not, you should entrust everything to Jung. So you need to continuously, put everything into one whole of Jung and keep practicing. That is the very fundamental principle of Gwan-beop practice. And based on the Dharma talks and the teachings of Seon Master Daehaeng, I just came up with these 5 aspects of Jung. Believing in Jung and entrusting everything to Jung and observing and putting into action. So this is the incessant cycle of all those 4 different areas, and Jung is right there, located in the center. This is a one big giant circle or wheel. When it comes to the methodology of Gwan-beop practice, I refer to the teaching of Seon Master Daehaeng. We should believe that Juingong does everything, and we should entrust everything to Juingong. We will just keep watching and observing what Juingong does, and we will just put what Juingong does into action. And now let me talk about the result of my study. The guidelines were developed based on the teachings of Seon Master Daehaeng, and also those guidelines went through the validation process by Hanmaum Sun Center monks to check their feasibility and the credibility. So there are a few guidelines that I came up with in the area of believing and having faith. The first one is understanding the concept of Juingong. The second guideline is to believe in the power of our mind that we already inherently possess. And the third one is see ourselves and Juingong as one. And the fourth one is believing that Juingong is the force behind everything. And the fifth one is to believe that Juingong presents us with the problems and also gives us the wisdom to solve them. Seon Master Daehaeng told us that we should believe in Juingong, and also we should regard the Juingong and ourselves as one. So Juingong is the true self, and it can do everything, and that's what we should believe as practitioners. So everything comes out of Hanmaum, and therefore the problems can be solved only within Hanmaum. That's why we need to keep observing what Hanmaum does. Now, let me talk about the guidelines that I identified in the area of entrusting. First of all, actually, we need to entrust everything to Juingong. That's one whole principle. And also, we need to raise well-decided single thought by entrusting. And also, we need to entrust incessantly. There were times that I had very complicated family issues, and I was in such a big agony. And the branch headmaster came to me and asked what troubles my mind so much, and who actually gave that those ties. And she also told me that I should put everything to Juingong and the furnace, so those ties can be melted down. And it was the time that I understood the teaching of Seon Master Daehaeng by heart. She also, the Seon Master Daehaeng also taught us that actually what we thought or what we think matters a lot. So if we hate someone or get pissed off, then that will be our input value, and that will be our destiny. And also, we shouldn't be lazy. So we should continuously practice, and also we need to use all our daily life's experiences as a material for our Gwan-beop practice. I believe that I can actually develop these Gwan-beop practice guidelines to help the general public to practice Gwan-beop without any doubt. So I just came up with 4 guidelines with regard to the observing area of Juingong. First one is observing with patience. The second one is observing without doubts. And the third one is observing without losing faith. And the fourth one is returning things in order and taking care of our mind. There were times that I actually doubted myself and the teachings of Seon Master Daehaeng. I tried to back off or back away and run away. However, after hearing a Dharmic talk of Seon Master Daehaeng, I realized that I was too impatient, and actually the only path ahead of me is to keep practicing. And on hindsight, I realized that I was on the right track. Seon Master Daehaeng told us that we shouldn't back away and should be patient till we have a great output from Juingong. I was very sick in the past, and I also had a chance to meet Seon Master Daehaeng in person. And she took care of me with such a great care, and I thought that Seon Master Daehaeng could save me and I wouldn't be sick anymore. However, next day I just found that I was still sick, even though the severity had decreased. So even after meeting Seon Master Daehaeng, it took another 10 years for me to actually relieve all those pains or my sickness, and I realized that actually there are some things that we should do ourselves. Seon Master Daehaeng told us that our doubt will hinder and also block the door to our realization of 주인공, so we shouldn't back away and keep trying and keep practicing. She also said that the people cannot see their roots because they are obscured by their customs, greed, and obsessions. Now, let me talk about the Gwan-beop practice guidelines in the area of putting in action. The first one is to understand the purpose of Gwan-beop practice, and the second guideline in this putting into action area is to practice with sincere and genuine attitude. And the third one is to study mind with teachers and fellow practitioners at a practice center. And the fourth one is to wish for deepening the practice, and the last one is to check on our own Gwan-beop practice. Seon Master Daehaeng told us that we should know ourselves first. So in order to identify the true self, we should practice Gwan-beop. She also told us that the entire universe would know whether we truly knew it or not. And also, we need to practice rigorously with a great sincerity to the state that we would believe even if we were a stone or a rock. And also for the practitioners who practice Gwan-beop, need guides and teachers. And if we engage ourselves in a temple or kind of sun center with full of energy, then we can recharge ourselves. And also we need to broaden our wisdom and our enlightenment by talking and interacting with the fellow practitioners. I told you that there were a few times that I wanted to give up and run away. However, thanks to the guidance and the teachings of our teachers and fellow practitioners, I have been able to stay on the right track and keep practicing. I believe that I was saved by the guidance and the teachings of my teachers and my fellow practitioners. And also, Seon Master Daehaeng told us that we need to continue to check ourselves on Gwan-beop practice and actually find whether we are on the right track or not. Now let me talk about the final outcome of my study. There are two main outcomes. The first one is the explanatory text for Gwan-beop practice guidelines out of the original text of Seon Master Daehaeng. Key remarks about Gwan-beop practice have been summarized so that the general public can understand Gwan-beop practice guidelines better. In addition to that, the original source of the explanatory text is specified, making it easier to access to the original text of Seon Master Daehaeng's teachings. The second outcome of my study is the Gwan-beop practice reflection tool. It is structured to enable self-reflection with 17 Gwan-beop practice guidelines, each of which is assigned with a score according to their importance rating. If the content is too heavy, it will be burdensome for busy modern people to use, so I made it compact. With the key points of Seon Master Daehaeng's teaching about Gwan-beop in a total of 6 pages. 3 pages printed on the front and back. Now let me provide you with some tips on how to use it. Please read the explanatory text of Seon Master Daehaeng's teachings first and then use the tool for self-reflection. According to the result of a pilot test participated by 7 practitioners of Hammam Sun Center and 3 non-practitioners, it was found to be very effective when the explanatory text and the reflection tool were used as one set. Now let me share the feedback of our pilot test participants. The first one is a non-practitioner's feedback. She told me that it helped her think about her own value, believe in herself, and practice positively. When meditating, it seemed to be effective in reducing impatience and examining her mind calmly. And also, there was a feedback from a new practitioner of Hammam Sun Center. That's what she said. When I found a paragraph that was intuitively understood in Seon Master Daehaeng's teachings, there was a real impact and I was so moved. But when I tried to find it again, to feel the touch feeling again, it was really hard because I was tired of trying to figure out what to listen to or what to find as a beginner of the practice. However, while reading the explanatory text for Gwan-beop practice guidelines, it was very refreshing to be able to revisit the important points of Seon Master Daehaeng's teachings that moved me in the past. But still, I do not have enough understanding of how I can regard the Jung and myself as one. This reflection tool has the advantage of showing the core of Jung Gwan-beop at a glance. If this tool is distributed or sold, I definitely want it and I want to recommend it to the people around me. And also, my fellow practitioner of Hammam Sun Center gave me a feedback. She said that actually she was in need of the key points or kind of way to further her practice of Gwan-beop. And she was kind of lost what to find and what kind of methods she can utilize or take advantage of. Now, the Gwan-beop practice guidelines and explanatory text actually is the right solution that I was looking for. I am so touched and I'm in tears. I promise to live my life more fully, helping people around me to become more enlightened. There also was another feedback from our fellow practitioner. Actually, she was in need of a systematic mind practice, and while looking at or using this Gwan-beop practice guidelines and explanatory text, she was relieved and felt grateful for the text and the guidelines, and also it was a great opportunity for me to look back on my mind practice, and also I believe that if I want to back away or become lazy in spiritual practice, I will use the reflection tool. And once again, I feel so grateful for the great teaching of Seon Master Daehaeng, even though she is not here with us. Now, let me summarize my study once again. The guidelines that will help on Gwan-beop practice of general public were developed on the basis of the expert panel's validation and importance evaluation. And I believe that will lay the foundation for the globalization of Gwan-beop practice. First, actually, I believe that the reflection tool can be utilized for the purpose of self-introspection, and also the guidelines can be utilized for professor syllabus, for the development of Gwan-beop practice program or education, and also it can be used as a measurement tool for Gwan-beop practice research. And I would like to conclude my presentation with the gratitude for the boundless grace of the Seon Master Daehaeng, who guided the spiritual practice of the general public. Thank you very much.
네, 。  네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 네, 。 예, 감사합니다. 발표 잘 들었습니다.
Thank you.
경험하신 부분
Dr. Yu.
이야기 중에는 저 개인적으로도
You just mentioned a few your private stories and episodes, and it just gave me a lot of implications to me as well. And thank you very much for your insightful presentation. When you actually provided this paper to Hammam Science Institute, you said that you haven't tried and tested it with the general public yet, but now it seems that you conducted the test already. We have 4 minutes left, so if there is any question from the floor, we can entertain a few questions. I am Daehaeng, and thank you very much for your presentation. It's very important for us to practice ourselves, and also it's great for us to have Gwan-beop practice guidelines. You said you are elementary school teacher. And I wonder whether these Gwan-beop practice guidelines can be utilized by elementary school students, middle school students, or the adults. So I believe that actually your guidelines are targeting the adults. So what could be the improvement points of your guidelines? Seon Master Daehaeng told us that actually mind practice is all depend on what kind of practice that we have ourselves. But still, in the modern society, we need to have such we need to have kind of toolkits to further accelerate our practice. Thank you very much for your question, and I believe that what you mentioned, the improvement points, are the tasks for my follow-up study. So those guidelines were not tested targeting the elementary school students. I just actually completed the summarized test or the interim test targeting the practitioners at Hammam Seon Center and adults. So if those guidelines are to be applied to the classrooms or the school children, maybe I can refine these guidelines to meet the needs or the knowledge level of school students. And also, I believe that there is a limited possibility for me to expand the scope of guidelines. So thank you for your recommendation to expand the target to school students. I wish the indefinite development of your research work. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much for your insightful presentation, Dr. Yu. I am Baek Do-soo from Korea Buddhist University. I am teaching meditation at temples such as Woljang Temple. You just mentioned what made you develop your Gwan-beop practice guidelines based on the teachings of Seon Master Daehaeng. The Buddha told us that we should actually pay attention to manage our body, our mind, and our mouth. So there are certain the tools for the Buddhist meditation developed until now. And also, when we think about the Hammam Gwan-beop practice, which is rigorously practiced at Hammam Seon Center, we need to think about when or what should be the right timing for Gwan-beop practice and who we should teach with regard to Gwan-beop practice guidelines. And what kind of methodology would be more sufficient for the application of Gwan-beop practice guidelines. So just came up with the guiding kind of guidelines with regard to the practice of Gwan-beop. But in reality, I believe that we need to come up with a kind of action-related guidelines to apply the guidelines on site or in actual the practicing sites. So I'm just wondering what kind of a physical kind of setting or the environment we can provide for the application of Gwan-beop practice guidelines. So I think it would be great if you can refine your guidelines in more detail, including those physical settings or the setup required for the application of the guidelines. I thought my time is up, but thank you very much for your question. We have overseas branches around the world, and also we have great experts and monks who practice Gwan-beop who are teaching the local people rigorously. And also we have support from fellow practitioners and teachers to provide the regular Gwan-beop practice teaching and the lessons on a regular basis. So since I'm an elementary school teacher, let me make an analogy of elementary school. So students come to school to study, and what's the purpose of study? So the purpose of study at school is to utilize and take advantage of the knowledge learned at school in daily lives. So the reason why we learn Gwan-beop practice at Hammam Sun Center is to practice the Gwan-beop in our daily lives and take advantage of the knowledge of Gwan-beop in our daily lives. So if that is the way it is, I believe that there is no specific designated place for our Gwan-beop practice. There is no specific physical surrounding required for Gwan-beop practice. That's how I see it. I hope that I answered your question. Let me add one more comment. So in order to build a strong mind power, we need to have our fellow practitioners and the Hammam Sun Center. Since, as a beginner, actually, it's very difficult for us to continue to practice Gwan-beop on a continuous basis. That's why we need to have a fellow practitioner. Actually, I'm talking about kind of physical setting. What I mean is what kind of gesture or what kind of body stance we need to have to enable Gwan-beop practice. So we have a lot of the practitioners. We have small kids and old people. So I'm just wondering what kind of body gesture or body stance will be more effective for different age practitioners. And also, I believe that there are several sun centers or kind of more suitable places where people can sit in and practice their Gwan-beop. So I was talking about the provision of such information to the practitioners. Thank you very much for your great advice and tips. In the interest of time, we would like to wrap up session number 4 now, and please give a big round of applause to Dr. Jung O. This brings us to the end of session number 4, and we'll take a break up until 10:30, and we'll come back with session number 5. Thank you.